grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got the best for so much less. You really flip your lid.
From bikes to trains to video games, it's the biggest toy store there is.
Gee whiz!
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid. More games, more toys. Oh boy, I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
You probably have memories of browsing the colourful aisles of Toys R Us as a child, filled with excitement and anticipation about the latest toys and games. For many people, Toys R Us was the go-to destination for playtime and childhood memories. But as you may have heard, the beloved toy retailer went from a thriving business to a company in decline and eventually filed for bankruptcy. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the rise and fall of Toys R Us, exploring the factors that contributed to its success and ultimate downfall. From its humble beginnings as a single store in New Jersey to its peak as a global toy retailer with over 1,500 locations, Toys R Us had a profound impact on the toy industry and the memories of millions of children. However, in the face of increased competition and changing consumer habits, Toys R Us struggled to keep pace and eventually declared bankruptcy in 2017. But what really caused the fall of this once great retailer? Was it a failure to adapt to the digital age, or something deeper? Join us as we delve into the history of Toys R Us and uncover the truth behind its rise and ultimate fall. Join us as we explore the fascinating story of the rise and fall of Toys R Us. Charles Lazarus was born on October 4th, 1923 in Washington, D.C. to a Jewish family of entrepreneurs. His father, Frank, owned a bicycle repair shop, which Charles would later credit with igniting his interest in retail. Lazarus's parents divorced when he was young, and he and his brother were primarily raised by their mother, Phoebe. To help make ends meet, Lazarus started working odd jobs at a young age, including selling vegetables and delivering newspapers. Despite facing financial hardships, Lazarus was a bright student and earned a scholarship to attend the Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia. After graduation, he briefly attended Georgetown University, but left after only one semester to serve in the army during World War II. In 1942, at the age of 18, Lazarus joined the Army Air Corps during World War II. He served as a cryptographer and was stationed in India and Burma. After the war, he returned to the United States and attended Georgetown University, but he left after 2 years to focus on his business ventures. In April of 1948, Lazarus rented the bike shop his father owned, and using the money he had saved serving in the military, opened a store selling cribs, strollers, and other necessities for new parents. Even though the baby furniture business was initially doing well in 1948, Lazarus saw that after a couple bought baby furnishings for their first child, they rarely came back to buy more when they had a second. Instead, they'd bring their kids in to see what new toys had been released or to replace a worn-out or damaged toy. And so, Lazarus started keeping more and more toys in stock. He understood that the consumers brought in the cash, therefore he made it a point to cater to their wants and requirements. Lazarus understood the importance of listening to the customer instantly, something that is still taught in business schools today. Quickly expanding, in June of 1957, Lazarus shifted the focus of his business in its entirety and leased a supermarket. He gave it the name Toys R Us, spelled with a backwards R as a kid would use, and filled it with nothing but toys. A seemingly endless supply of toys was neatly arranged on shelves at a toy store that was almost too good to be true. It quickly became the most popular toy retailer, devouring smaller stores that couldn't compete with the low costs. The success of Toys R Us, the first toy specialty store, can be attributed in part to the company's ability to harness the prevailing American values of abundance and wealth at the time. Toys were mostly sold around the holiday season until the 1950s, when consumer tastes shifted. Toys R Us transformed toy shopping from a seasonal rite of passage into a year-round ritual. This cultural shift is an underlooked, yet incredible achievement for a man and business with humble beginnings. The popularity of Toys R Us grew as word of mouth spread, but what really sealed the deal for the store's success was the digital revolution that the television brought. Children were spending an average of 25 hours a week in front of the television. So, toy companies like Mattel started targeting them with commercials for their newest products. TV commercials aimed squarely at kids were a first for many companies. In little time at all, kids were begging their parents for the newest and greatest toys they'd seen advertised. And for good measure, Toys R Us's memorable jingle from the 1980s and 1990s undoubtedly helped the company become an icon in the minds of children aged 8 and up. It seemed like this train was unstoppable, and that the good times would never end. So where did it all go wrong? Lower costs on baby products from more established competitors like Walmart in the 1990s marked the beginning of the end for Toys R Us. Amazon and Target had also stepped out of the metaphorical shadows to give the toy retailer a serious headache. In an effort to get shoppers in, the big three retailers, being Walmart, Target and Amazon, began offering deep discounts on baby items and toys. By contrast, Toys R Us only sold toys. The corporation was in the same position as the small toy shops it had wiped out decades earlier. They were being outdone by retailers simply offering more. Toys R Us was flailing in the water. When it came to shopping online, Walmart and Target were miles ahead of the curve in the early 2000s. So, back in the year 2000, Toys R Us made the executive decision to form a 10-year collaboration with Amazon rather than invest in creating and extending its internet presence. In exchange for the exclusive right to sell toys and other baby products on Amazon, Amazon received $50 million per year plus a portion of sales. This arrangement seemed to be working well for the toy retailer from the outside, but customers who went to the URL toysrus.com were diverted to Amazon. When Amazon saw how popular toys were, the company grew its infant and toy selection and recruited new sellers, some of whom were direct rivals to Toys R Us. Now, this was in direct violation of their actual agreement, which has stated that Toys R Us had the exclusive right to sell toys and baby products on Amazon. So, Toys R Us eventually filed a lawsuit against Amazon in order to terminate their agreement, winning the case and $15 million in the process. But the damage had already been done. To make matters worse, by the time the toy company embraced the internet buying trend, it had fallen well behind its rivals. Poor strategy and branding weren't the only corporate sin the toy retailer had committed. By 2005, Toys R Us had accumulated debt of $1.86 billion and was experiencing declining revenues and sluggish sales. The board of directors decided to take the company private by selling it to 3 investment groups for $6.6 billion, giving it a fighting chance to recover from its recent health scare. It looked like a good idea on paper. Taking the corporation private would provide an opportunity for new strategy, the elimination of redundant procedures, and the development of a more robust enterprise. The company would then be able to return the money to its shareholders. However, it all went horribly wrong. What was supposed to be an initial $2 billion in debt ended up ballooning to $5 billion as soon as they put pen to paper. Toys R Us hoped the acquisition would offer the company more leeway to innovate and revive its flagging sales. However, the company was unable to earn a sustainable profit because of its massive debt, which restricted its ability to make investments and hampered the company's growth. From 2014 to 2017, Toys R Us incurred annual net losses and paid staggering annual interest of $425 to $517 million. But the bottom line wasn't the real issue here. No, it ran much deeper. The root cause in this case was something that top leadership often don't see: the leadership itself. The Toys R Us upper management lacked the foresight, desire, and urgency to adapt to changing times. It also happened that they didn't really give much of a damn about the company outside of the paychecks they were getting. And there's a reason for that we'll discuss a bit later, but here's one example to really put that into perspective. After filing for bankruptcy in 2017, the executive team awarded itself millions in bonuses rather than reorganize debt and find a means to keep the business running. Then CEO Dave Brandon was awarded $2.8 million in bonuses as the company filed for bankruptcy, and that was on top of the $12.5 million in other incentives he was already getting. CFO Michael Short was also the recipient of some healthy bonuses. This excerpt is certain to make you queasy. It's worth noting that the toy retailer won approval to pay $16 million in bonuses to 17 top executives. 5 of the top Toys R Us executives received $8.2 million in retention bonuses 5 days before the bankruptcy filing in September. The increased bonuses came on top of the millions in extra compensation that executives already got before filing for bankruptcy. Some have speculated that the company lost its direction when Charles Lazarus left his position at the helm in 1994, although he was involved in the company for a few more years in different capacities until 1998 when he retired from his consultant position. Still, when did bankruptcies become acceptable reasons for pay increases? Creditors who lost money during the bankruptcy of toy retailer Toys R Us naturally produced evidence that the company's management and board members prioritized their own financial interests and those of private equity owners over those of the company's creditors. Even though they knew they couldn't fulfill the terms of their debtor-in-possession loans necessary for the reorganization, Toys R Us's management and board members nonetheless elected to go through with it. The revolving door of Toys R Us's CEOs ensured the lack of any consistent strategy at the corporation. There was no stability, no loyalty. This naturally led to the unfortunate festering of corporate greed. The company constantly cycled through externally sourced CEOs, and they all wanted to do things differently. The picture becomes even uglier when you consider that research has found that external management hires are 61% more likely to be fired than internal ones. However, the idea that Toys R Us failed due to its excessive debt brought on by private equity is only half the story. Another overlooked aspect is how employees have always been harmed by leveraged buyouts. Experts are of the opinion that everything shifted once the store was acquired roughly 10 years ago. Many jobs were cut suddenly to try and squeeze as much money as possible out of the company. The goal of private equity investments is typically not to create sustainable enterprises capable of rapid expansion, but rather to maximize profit with minimal outlay of capital. Not only were there now fewer workers at the stores, but their pay had dropped as well. Depending on individual performances, Toys R Us awarded raises to its staff ranging from a measly 25 cents to 75 cents an hour. After the buyout was finalized, it became increasingly difficult to award even these bonuses. When coupled with strategic and branding misses, these leadership failures proved themselves to be of catastrophic magnitude. Just the layoffs themselves are a tragedy in their own right. The New York Business Journal reported that even after being laid off, many workers were not given severance packages. In another scandal, the CPSC also issued a recall for a line of O-ball baby rattles because there were alarms about them choking young children. Because of this, Toys R Us had to pull the rattles from shelves everywhere. Attempts to sell a line of Breaking Bad toys, yes, the show about drug cartels and violence, adult toys, illegal raves at abandoned stores, breaking agreements, and people stealing millions of dollars worth of merchandise were among just some of these scandalous incidents to hit the company. The controversies undermined Toys R Us's standing as a dependable and trustworthy retailer, which resulted in a decline in customer loyalty and confidence. They caused the corporation to suffer large financial losses in the form of court costs, fines, and settlements for the many lawsuits and investigations, among other expenses. For instance, in 2000, the Business and the Federal Trade Commission (FTC) reached a settlement regarding claims that it had broken the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Toys R Us was obliged by the settlement to pay a $350,000 fine and have new privacy policies and procedures in place. Investor losses resulted from the scandal's impact on the company's stock price and overall shareholder value declining. The company's shares reached a high of over $30 per share in the early 2000s, but by 2017 they were only worth less than $1 per share. It's not that surprising that customer loyalty and belief in the brand itself eventually began to fizzle out. Toys R Us's suppliers heard rumors of the company's severe financial difficulties in 2017. and they became concerned that they would be on the hook for losses, and so became more stringent with product terms. Finally, in September of 2017, just before the start of the holiday shopping season, the financially strapped retailer filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Chapter 11 is a form of bankruptcy that involves a reorganization of a debtor's business affairs, debts, and assets, and for that reason is known as reorganization bankruptcy. It was perhaps the worst time to make such a move, as they missed out on almost 40% of annual revenues as a result. As in years past, those purchases might have provided the necessary revenue for Toys R Us to remain in business for another year. During the months of November and December, when Toys R Us was on its final legs, competitors stepped up their holiday toy promotions, vendors cut back on supply shipments, and shoppers shied away from making purchases at the retailer. On March 15th, 2018, Toys R Us announced its bankruptcy due to declining sales and increasing debt. Charles Lazarus, its founder, passed just a week after the company began liquidating. 735 stores in the United States were operational at the time of the announcement. Everything had shut down by the end of June. The disparity between Toys R Us lowest level staff and corporate management grew more apparent as word of the company's financial crisis spread. The retail giant laid off more than 30,000 employees and stated they would not be compensated for the lost wages or vacation time. The effects of the Toys R Us bankruptcy were widespread. After a photo of a sad Geoffrey the giraffe with a suitcase in an otherwise empty store went viral, many customers expressed their regret at the chain's demise. Employees held a large gravestone in the lobby of Toys R Us's corporate headquarters in Bain, acting out a mock funeral for Geoffrey. The loss of this beloved chain was felt all across the States. Toys R Us had meant a lot to its customers. However, like with all good stories, all was not quite lost yet. Macy's announced a deal with WHP Global, the parent company of Toys R Us, in the summer of 2021, marking the beginning of the brand's revival after it had kicked the metaphorical bucket for 3 years. In July of 2022, the historic store upped the ante by saying that by the middle of October, each brick-and-mortar Macy's would feature an internal Toys R Us shop. Those plans have since been successful. An in-store sale that lasted for 9 days celebrated both the brand's comeback and the birthday of Geoffrey the giraffe, the store's mascot for decades. In light of recent significant sale events organised by retail giants Walmart, Amazon, Target and Kohl's, the toy company aimed to capitalise on its reopening by making a determined effort to attract customers. As of late, Babies R Us has also made a comeback. For the moment at least, it seems that the iconic brand isn't quite done yet. We can never quite say for sure what the future may hold for the brand, but its comeback certainly has a nice feel about it. The company built its success on listening to customers and staying ahead of the market. However, they eventually also lost their way and lost sight of exactly that, becoming bogged down by unsustainable business models, poor HR practices, scandals, and a top leadership that quite simply seemed out of its depth. Going forward, the brand will certainly have to keep in mind the harsh lessons it learned. There is certainly a market for it out there, but it is now constantly evolving and extremely competitive, and it will have to adapt to the need of the hour. It remains to be seen whether they can do it, but fans will certainly be hopeful. The Chronicle of Toys R Us provides not only a lesson for businesses, but also for communities in general. If you want growth that doesn't come back to bite you, you must be prepared to be patient and organic, and of course you cannot lose sight of what makes you special chasing the bottom line. With that said, we also don't want you to lose sight of the subscribe button, so if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.